Hello and welcome to the Cancel This podcast. Live interviews with people about cancel culture, people who may have been cancelled, or people who are heroes, or some people who are both. And today we're interviewing an amazing woman. What an incredible human being who I know I followed, and probably all of you did here during those dark times known as the COVID times. So please put your hands together. Welcome to the stage, Dr. Aidan McCloskey.
It's the same Derry, I'm affronted, mortified. Well, thank you, Aidan, for allowing me to be here, and thank you to your lovely audience for that incredibly warm welcome. I'm kind of embarrassed, and I hope you aren't all looking to go home early if I rant on. Yeah, it's a really great pleasure to be here. I spent 6 very happy years in Dublin. As I used to say to the Belfast graduates, I'm properly educated. I did my medical degree at UCD and the Mater Misery Hospital.
Since the last time I saw you, you've been going up for election and you've been in prison. So, well, you certainly lived your life to the fullest. So, tell us about prison. How was that?
It was great. I'll tell you a better one, Aidan. I think I am probably the only person who was physically forced to be removed from a prison, because I got 2 weeks in Hyde Bank Women's Penitentiary for non-payment of an unlawful fine, and I served 2 days. I kind of expected to serve a week, and it was the week that my birthday fell in. So on the second day, the morning of the second day, there was great kerfluffling on the wing, as we lags call it. And the governor had come to see me, and he says, "You're free to go." And I said, "I beg your pardon, what do you mean? I'm here I have a 2-week sentence to serve." And he says, "No, you're free to go. We have no authority to keep you." And I said, "Well, I told you that before." I've been saying that in the court now for 2.5 years, that you have no authority, the whole thing's unlawful. And he says, no, but your fine has been paid." And I said, "Well, can I see the receipt? Can you tell me who paid it?" He says, "No." And he says, I said, "Well, you must know who paid it." I said, "Somebody just can't rock up to a prison and say, I'm going to pay his or her fine, and then you let them out. That's obviously not going to work." And he says, "Well, I think it might have been your husband." I just fell over laughing. The man is having the time of his life. He has a house to himself. I'm not going to be back for a whole week. He can binge on football and just everything. And I said, "Well, that for certain sure is not true." And the other thing is, my husband knows better than to pay a fine I didn't pay. He could be on very short rations for the rest of his natural. So we managed to dispense of that nonsense, and he still couldn't tell me who paid the fine. So the media said it was grateful patience. I don't know. The only place the fine could have been paid was to the courthouse in Derry.
Why were you in prison? Why did they send you to prison? I know the answer.
Because I have shown them with notarized, unrebutted affidavits that their system is corrupt to the core, that the Northern Ireland Court and Tribunal Service is essentially a gang of criminal conspirators, that the paperwork that they produce and have produced for at least a decade, probably longer, is issued in the name of an entity that doesn't exist. The person who was in prison, the alleged unsigned arrest warrant was not me. I got my date of birth wrong. My date of birth now is common knowledge in the North. I'm affronted because I was hoping, with a bit of slap, you could get by with telling a few white lies. No, they have said that first of all, my name is Dr. Mary Ann McCloskey. I've had brushes with the PSNI and the RUC and whatever before. They know who I am. It's on my passport, it's on my driving licence, it's on all my documents, it's on all their records. So they have made up this fictional entity of Ann McCloskey with a date of birth, the 18th of January. My birthday is the 18th of June. So that the entity who they summoned to court, I didn't ever appear in front of the court. The clerk of the court perjured herself and entered that I had pleaded not guilty. I never darkened the door of the court. So because of general bad manners and defiance, they had two choices. They could double down, or they could admit that the notarized affidavits, which we had shown that their system is unlawful, that the whole thing was a farce. No, first of all, no crime was committed. The crime was me trying as a doctor. It is under oath, my duty to prevent harm and to preserve the health and life and well-being of not only my patients but of the wider community. That is, this is something that it's not an optional extra. It's something that every doctor in this country is required by the oaths that they swear and by the trust in which people hold them, that you're required to call these things out. And this is actually in the founding documents of the General Medical Council.
So you did take the jab then? They've created a legal entity, a fictional entity, yes, with a name similar to yours, with a date of birth similar to yours, and they're using that as an excuse, saying this person here has done something illegal, and therefore, based on that, they put you in prison. Yeah. But the
living woman who is not that fictional entity,
the human being
yes,
here in front of us, they're making a claim that something happened here, and I'm guessing that you didn't wear a mask, or you're outside your 5K rule, or what are they claiming that this person did?
This person
or the human
stood
being?
Up in the open air in the Guildhall Square in the centre of the town I loved so well in Derry, along with Pierce Corbin, Jeremy's brother, and a few other people, and told the people of Derry of my experiences while working in the COVID ward and in the GP out of our centre. The 1st November 2020, we had an afternoon meeting, and that night, this is funny, that night, you weren't there, but you were there at a different time. That night, this again is the depths of the first lockdown, and after this happened, there were half of the crowd retreated back to my back kitchen, and we sat around the table, and it was like standing room only. And then came the knock at the door, and I was going. So it was a peeler, and he says, "I have a COVID ticket for you." And I said, "Well, you know what you can do with it." And I'd rather go to McGabbery before I would accept it. McGabbery is actually the male prison. Wouldn't mind going there. I've tried the women's prison.
Well, all you have to do is change your identity. Peter, the policeman, turn up at your house
and he said,
with
he
a
offered
piece of
me
paper,
this ticket.
and he offered it to you.
But before I answered the door, I said to the 45 people standing like this in my kitchen, "Shut up. Please be quiet. There's going to be a whole handling here." So I went out to the door. The next thing I heard, a stool falling over, and then titters, shuffles. Just going, oh, how useless. So yeah, anyway, he went away, and they had a hearing, and my mate I'm an old lady, and I worked very hard, and I thought I love playing golf, and at this stage I thought I'd be playing golf in the Riviera for most, and the rest of it. So I used to play away at golf. So the first day of the first court, I played golf, and the day of the second court, I played golf, and my mate is a handicap secretary, and she's a printout. I played shit. The first day I was so affronted. I said, if that's produced in court, I'm going to die of shame. And then my score was so bad. But I didn't go to the court, and with a little help from my co-conspirator friends in the north, we made a trust and appointed, I was the executor, and we appointed the judge and the cops and all as trustees, and they very kindly accepted that position, or at least I didn't hear to the contrary. And then Barney McElhone, the judge, then went to the papers and said, she apparently is now can tell me what to do, and that whatever. And then that meant that he breached the trust because it was a private trust. So he owes me 7 gold sovereigns. So the fine was paid out of 7 gold sovereigns. So as far as I'm concerned, the fine is paid. And actually on paper, they did intimate that there was no balance against my name, and he still owes me 6 9/10 gold sovereigns. I'll be knocking for it one of the days. Anyway, so that was what it was about. It's just a nonsense upon nonsense. I wasn't served any summons. I did not go to the court. The clerk of the court entered a plea of not guilty, which I didn't make. I wasn't there. Anyway, so this has been rumbling on, and as I say, what they can do is say, well, she's right, but obviously that's not going to happen. So, they had to put me in jail for non-payment of a fine. And they followed me. I had notarized affidavits. I think this is really important for people to understand, is that we are at war with our government, and you've heard it said, and people say your government is your enemy, and that that the government is not acting in your best interest. No, there is in this country and England, well, particularly in Northern Ireland. I mean, the island of Ireland has been essentially under emergency powers since before the 1916 rising, and certainly in the north. I very much remember the Special Powers Act. I'm old enough to remember internment. I'm old enough to remember I was there. I was only a teenager at the time of Bloody Sunday. I never washed, after the funerals, I washed about 4 million teacups in Craigan Community Centre. I lived through all of that, and I remember the barbed wire. I remember the house raids. I remember all of it. And this is what is planned under emergency powers. The government reserves unto itself these powers to use. Interestingly, in the north, the special powers were lifted for health. 11th of March 2024, they lifted the emergency powers for health, but they kept them for the courts. Because unless you have a judiciary and a court and tribunal service which will enforce illegality and make people suffer and put people in prison and fine people for things that are completely unlawful, that the courts are charging them with unlawfully. If you do not have that strong arm of the law, and to give it a veneer of respectability, and then the media to carry all that forward, you're screwed. So the health thing, they dropped quietly because people had sort of moved on from that, but they are still in the north on using emergency powers. And I think you see very clearly, and again, I'm digressing a bit and maybe skipping forward, but what is happening in this country now with a lot of the staged rioting is a playbook which the British have used in this country and indeed across the world, time after time after time. Divide people, get them to hate one another, get them fighting, and then kill them all, both sides. Didn't pay the fine. The cops followed me for 30 miles. Going to Belfast one day, I go up to scan at a wee early pregnancy centre in Belfast, and they followed me for 30 miles. And I was looking in the mirror, and I was going, and I was checking speed, drove grand. And then I said, right, I'm going to find out if they're following me or not. So I got up to the turnoff for Antrim Airport, and nearly at the very last minute, and I just turned and went up the thing. Sure enough, they came up after me, and I went, shit, they're following me. Got up to the top of the slip road, and there was a car crash. There was a car ploughed into the middle of another car, and I went, Anne, you paranoid bitch. They've no interest in you. They're up here for this car crash. No. Pulled out past the car crash, never looked left nor right, put on their nurners and and stopped me, and I gave them a notarized affidavit for status, claiming protection under the Geneva Convention as a private civilian in time of war, and the protections that the Geneva Convention affords. And I suggest all of you have a look at this and decide whether it's something that is worth doing, certainly. So this, and he was a senior officer. He wasn't a wee sort of cop on the beat. He came up and he looked at it, and it was internationally notarized affidavit. And he looked at it and he read it. And I said, I told him that I am seeking protection under the Geneva Convention as a private civilian. And he did. He looked at it and he looked at the notary thing and he felt it and he said, you're free to go. There's nothing I can do. And let me go. I went, yes. You were right. Didn't believe it. This court date was coming up again. The post office stays open to 8 o'clock, and at about 20 to 8, I had 8 notarized affidavits for the Lady Chief Justice, the Chief Constable, Deputy Chief Constable, the Attorney General. I can't even remember. There was a whole, all the lawyers who'd been involved in the case. So I had 8 of those, and I was going down to post them, going to make the last bit of the post office so they'd have them for 12 o'clock in 2 days under Royal Mail Special Delivery. I came down the foot of the drive, and I driving out. I looked down, and I live at the top of a hill, and I looked down, there's a cop car sitting here indicating left, and I went, oh shit. So squealed the tyres up Chapel Road, through a housing estate. These boys are on my heels, and I'm going down. Broke an orange light. They had to stop at red. You could see the steam coming out of the car. Into the supermarket, handbrake turn, and into the post office. got the 8 of them. They hate me because I always land at 5 to 8 with 8 special deliveries, and they're just going, no, not her again. Make her go away. So I got the things posted. If I'd been 30 seconds later, I would have been halfway up the drive and they'd have been up the drive. See, this we are looked after. It's great. It's me St. Benedict medal. So, yeah, I got the things posted and I come out and the 2 boys are standing there and I just sort of went, as they say, it's a fair cop. So they cuffed me and stuck me in the Black Maria and took me to Coleraine, which is an hour's drive away. So there's a reason for this very long-winded story. The reason I contend that they took me to Coleraine, which is an hour's drive away, whereas the house that I live in is a couple of 100 yards from the new, all singing, all dancing, modern, waterside custody suite that was opened just before Christmas, at the same time as Coleraine Custody Suite was closed down. They chose to drive me an hour and keep me sitting for an hour outside and put me in this disgusting dungeon of a police cell rather than have me in Derry for court the next day, because they intended to put me in a virtual courtroom. I didn't sleep all night. It was freezing cold. I was assaulted twice during my stay there by a cop. The next morning, I didn't have anything to eat, didn't have anything to drink. I did have water. It was obviously a disused facility, and I was the only person there that I could see. Now, we've sent for an FOI, and they said, wasn't it strange that the new all singing, all dancing, brand new plush custody suite was closed for 4 days maintenance? So that's why I had to go to Coleraine to lie. But anyway, this is an FOI after the event. They kept me there. I come out in the morning. I asked about 4 or 5 times on arrival, are you sure I'm going to be taken to the court in Derry? Are you sure I'm going to be taken to the court in Derry? Yes. Will there be transport here in the morning to bring me to the court in Derry? Yes, you will be in the court in Derry. We will make sure that you're in the court in Derry. What happened, they opened the cell. I tried to take my Bible with me, which I brought from home. And they said, you won't need that. And I said, but I'm going to court. I need this with me. And they said, this cop, a real British guy, said, if you don't put that down now, you're going straight to jail. Now, I'm not sure if he had any authority to say that, but I'm quite sure he didn't. But anyway, that's what happened. So there followed a bit of an argument about this Bible, and eventually he says, leave it there, I'm just going to lock you up again. So I left the Bible, and I was still going to go to the transport that was going to take me to the court in Derry. But what happened was they took me into another, essentially what was a cell, along with this thug. He pushed me on the way up to it and nearly knocked me over, again, hopefully on CCTV. Went into this room, and in the middle of the room, there's a table, and there's a tablet, sort of 6 inches by 8 inches. And this is the court. They want to put the whole criminal justice, or the criminal justice doesn't make sense, the whole court and tribunal facade onto digital, so virtual, so that there's no habeas corpus. You do not have to be in the court. And what happened was, so I couldn't see the court. Elisa, my friend here, and my brother were in the court. Elisa had driven from County Down the night before. I couldn't see anything except the side of the judge's head. This is the boy that owns me the 7 gold sovereigns, and I was going, give me my money, but didn't. But he knows. And I was giving him fake entity, and I don't consent to a digital hearing. I do not consent to an online court. And giving him and just reading my rights and telling him I was protected by the Geneva Convention, and that it was an affidavit or a series of affidavits stating this. And he started shouting back, and the cop in the cell with me reached over and turned off the virtual court. Now, in a public court, if you stood up and you were addressing the judge, even if you were being a bit ill-mannered about it, as I'm sure I was making my valid points, and he was shouting over me. If a cop came up and put his hand over your mouth and assaulted you and pulled you physically out of the court, there would be uproar. In essence, what happened is I was silenced in a court of law. My hands were put up my back in some sort of these fancy grips that the RUC are particularly skilled at, and I was dragged up the corridor and thrown back into the cell. Now, as I say, if that happened in a real court, in these digital courts, and this is something that is common here and it's common everywhere, it has to be resisted, because what they want They can AI your voice. They can lose stuff. They can change stuff. They can edit. They can insert all of it. It means that there's absolutely no possibility of being able to self-represent. So and to make a natural presentation. What we have found over the last 4 years is that the entire legal profession is on the make. Does that come as a surprise? Any lawyers here? None whatsoever. Particularly this legal aid thing. They are creaming in millions with solicitors and barristers and the courts, is that everybody gets paid and nothing changes. They will not go to the roots of the filth that is the system. They won't look at it. All they will do is prick about and pat one another in the back.
So you had these men following you around in the car who were acting as policemen and intimidating you and then physically assaulting you and then ultimately kidnapping you if it's unlawful.
Yeah.
So kidnapping you.
I like to use the word internment.
Against your will, interned against your will, and then silenced and threatened and, you know, having the Bible taken from you. So you kind of talked about that very casually. And I know this is a casual conversation, but what did that feel like and how did you have the strength to handle it? Or did you break down?
It felt great.
Yeah, it felt great.
It didn't. I know. I've been expecting this. I've known that this is where it's going to lead, and I don't want it to sound like Bernie Devlin or whatever. But do you know what I mean? What I am saying is that I have no fear of these people, none, and they can do what they want. I have grandchildren. I have children and grandchildren. I had a bloody great life. I did love my work. I like to think I did some good. I know I ran our baby clinic for 20 years. But you know, I to be fair, I spent a lot of time taking people off medication and encouraging children that they didn't need a diagnosis for feeling shit.
Come here, you were in prison and up to then you seem to be okay with it, fine, you have your own inner strength because you're more worried about your grandchildren, so you're taking that strength, I presume, for them, for their for the future.
Yeah.
What was prison like? Did you make any friends? Did you get food? Did you watch telly?
I haven't watched telly in 30 years, but anyway, even prison wouldn't reduce me to watch TV. But to be fair, the staff in McGabry were lovely. They were absolutely kind, respectful. They are completely hidebound because the rules are meant to be so ridiculous and intrusive, and you couldn't make a phone call until somebody had called out to make sure the person wanted your phone call. I get it. I mean, people might be harassing them or whatever. These arbitrary lockups. Oh, you got to be locked up now for an hour, and you have to go into your cell for an hour, and then somebody was coming new on the wing, and all of that. Now there were 2 floors, and the floor that I was in was was noted kind of the normal floor, where a lot of the women were. Well, first of all, the one thing about a spell in a women's prison makes you realise how lucky you are to have sanity in your life. A lot of these people came from broken homes, abusive relationships, drug, alcohol misuse. They were being sexually abused from childhood. Some really harrowing stories. And the youngest was just out of school, and the eldest was a granny. Sorry, I was the eldest, I'd say, and then some. But there was no badness in any of them. Now there was another wing, and there was a fair bit of shouting went on down there. Now I've met some of those girls. You're kept kind of separately, but I saw them. I'd say at least half of those women should have been in hospital rather than in prison. These are people who were very disturbed, and there was there's a detox facility and stuff like that. But as I say, it made me so appreciative of the stuff that we take so much for granted. It was a good library. I'd be happy as Larry in there, for I'll go back and do 6 months if I have to. Doesn't bother me. There's a lot of Marion Keys in it and that sort of stuff, but there was a reasonably good sort of politics section. And
I heard a rumour that one of the reasons they being the establishment, made an example of you, and if she doesn't pay the fine, we're going to send her to prison, was because you were getting into politics, and they were possibly threatened by that. You stuck your toe in the dirty swamp known as politics. What was that like?
It's the fifth time. I stood as an independent in Derry in 2016 and damn nearly got elected to Stormont. Eamon McCann beat me by 50 votes. We were nip and tuck the whole day, and I was going, please let Eamon have it. Because I was still working full time. I had no notion of getting elected. I nearly died. But I was known as the dissident doctor because I was a sort of an anti-Sinn Féin Republican, I suppose. And again, to put that in historical context, I joined Sinn Féin Freshers Week, UCD, 1975. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. And I mean, as I say, I come from that tradition. But the more you know, and the more you look behind the curtain, the more you see that the division and the sectarianism is simply a tool used to control people, and it very, very apparent. So the jail, yeah, it was I would do it again in a heartbeat, and it wouldn't bother me, because I have a feeling I might be back. It depends how this all pans out. I mean, I think internment will be back. I mean, we hear Keir Starmer, the lovely lefty, that is going to get rid of those nasty Tories. The opposition in England, the only thing they had to say about the tyranny imposed by the Tory party was that they would do it harder, faster, quicker, and worser. That was the opposition, and it was the same here. Where you had almost no dissent. You just have a uni party. I like to say the two wings of a one bird instead of the other descriptive, which is used.
Do you think it could make any difference, politics? Like, what happens if you
not
did get elected?
Not a snowball's chance in hell.
What's the point in going for it then? Just to annoy
them? To make them angry. Yeah.
And you were going with Aintu for a while, and then you weren't. Did you get booted out of Aintu?
No.
What happened there?
I booted Aintu. Well, again, right, that was a 2016. Aintu, at that time I was an independent, and I really did believe. I don't know if any of you have read, and I really strongly recommend it. It's a pamphlet by a woman called Simone Weil, who is a French philosopher. She was, I think, a convert to Catholicism in her later years. She was a communist and an anarchist and all the rest, and then she got sense. And she wrote this thing on the abolition of all political parties. I think it's about £6 in Amazon. It's an hour or two's read. It's very, very good. And it talks about the fact that once you have a party structure, and I still believe this, that the first thing that happens is you get nepotism, you get rivalry, you get dissension, you get nuances of opinion. Do you know the way I have 3 brothers, and I love them dearly, and we're from the one nest. I have never had political rows with people like those, because we're together 99.9%, and it's that last bit that you would kill for. So that in political parties you have people broadly the same. You also have corruption, and always you have plants and spoilers. So we find this, the beginning of the COVID thing, there were groups and all the rest. I mean, in every meeting you could look at the people who were there purposely trying to subvert it and destroy it. In the independent model of political representation, you represent yourself. The only person you're accountable to is yourself. The only person you're fiscally accountable to is yourself. You pay for your own stuff. And then the only people that you're beholden to is the people you ask to vote for you. They're the only people you have to please, and you must tell them you're not going to please all of them all of the time. It's not possible. And they can take it or go elsewhere. But it's means that you have a relationship with the electorate which can be productive. And I think we saw that here in the 26 counties, and that some of the Shannon and some of the independent cohort in the Dáil were at least whimpering. They weren't exactly blazing, all guns blazing. What happened was, in February 2020, I got elected then to Derry and Strabane District Council after I retired as GP, and it was very much in the district where my patients were. Pater had headhunted me, and he came and I said, I cannot join a political party. He was just going with Aintu. And just, spoiler alert, I have respect for Pater to be, and I think he's brave. Pater, in a Sinn Féin-led government in the south, which at that time looked very likely, 2019. He'd have been a shoe-in for Minister for Finance. He's an accountant. He's got that background. He's an economist. He's clever. He's a hard worker. But he's a shinner. At the back of it all, he really is. He's 25 years in Sinn Féin, and he's a complete leftist. He goes for the alphabet soup nonsense. He goes for the woke stuff. And he said, whenever I started saying, COVID ain't what they're saying. I went back to work because I sort of believed it for a month or two that there was something terrible happening. And from the inside...
You came to help, didn't you?
I came to help, yeah.
Yeah, like a hero.
But I tell you what I saw was just that the health service was closed down and people were being abandoned. I did one shift in the GP COVID assessment centre, and while I was inside with 2 other doctors, 9 or 10 nurses, half a dozen admin staff, a couple of porters, we saw 3 patients in 4 hours. None of whom had COVID.
And did you help them out with the dancing, the choreography?
Do you know?
Was that you? Were
do you know? It happened in that hospital.
Oh God, did it?
Yeah, it did, yeah.
The hospitals are empty. You said that. And then some people, your peers, I presume, or your superiors.
While I was inside in an empty GP COVID assessment centre, Tom Black, the British Medical Association rep for the North of Ireland, was standing and things saying it's like a war zone in there. Just a lie. And I collared him about it. I emailed from the start, and this is all recoverable. I emailed the chief medical officers, England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. I emailed every GP. I emailed every MLA. I emailed loads of TDs. I emailed all of the heads of the health boards in the North. I emailed the Medical Defence Union. I emailed the General Medical Council. I emailed Tony Blair, who else? Mariana Spring, the media, all the newspapers, all of them, just saying, this is bullshit. These are the facts. These are the stats, fully referenced. I never got one acknowledgement. I wrote to the media, all of the newspapers and all of the radio stations and says, I wrote to the Minister for Health and says, debate me anywhere, any hour of the day or night, in a venue of your choosing, any time, I will make myself available. Never heard anything back because those emails, to even acknowledge them, meant that they don't have plausible deniability. And I have about 30 notices of liability for harm and death going to the same group of people, which are, and the General Medical Council as well. So all of that paperwork is done. I had worked full-time as a GP. I did 1 night in 4 on call. I reared 4 wains. Did a wee bit of housekeeping, not a huge amount. I never was busier than I've been over the last 4 years. It's a 12-hour day. It's reading stuff. It's keeping up to date. It's connecting with people. It's driving from Derry to Dalkey to talk to you lovely people. It's going to rallies. It's doing everything. And I'm not trying to be. I like to think that nothing I have been asked to do that I could do, I have refused, because this is the fight of our lives, all of it. We know where this is going. You haven't had a word in edgeways, Aidan. I'm well sorry.
Well, we're here to listen to you. I listen to myself every day. You're great, Aidan. You're great, Aidan. You're great, Aidan.
I know. What about Once Upon a Lockdown? I swear to God, I never enjoyed anything like it. I really mean it.
Thank you.
He didn't make me promise to say this. I thought it was the most uplifting, wonderful, just heartwarming celebration of humanity. And it was during a rotten time, and I'm so proud that one of the 32 counties was my back garden.
It was one of your back garden, and one of the things that I noticed on that, which I'll bring up now because you mentioned a medal here, but a lot of the people that I met, and I didn't know, I just said I'll gig anywhere in Ireland, and people would invite me, and I'd come to your house. Now, I certainly knew of you, and we'd already met, but some of them I'd never met. But I noticed they had a spirit about them. Either they were Catholics or Christians, even Protestants. Even Protestants were there. But they all had a strong spiritual practice. They had something else that was like a stronger force than the media and the thing. So I'm guessing, since you have a medal there, what medal is it? St. Benedict or a miraculous medal?
My miraculous medal, first of all, and then there's this St. Benedict cross, and it's blessed and all that stuff.
So
works,
Does that? It does, yeah. I hear you.
My parents were devout Catholics, and it's not easy being a Catholic nowadays, is it? With the crap that's going on in the Vatican and all of the whole thing. It's disgusting, a lot of it. The way they say there's a bear shit in the woods. I think that bears still do, but the Pope ain't a Catholic. That's for sure. I hope I'm not offending anybody here, but look, I think it's a difficult time, and we were talking recently, the whole Vatican II thing where everything was upended and changed, and the fact that this was, I don't know if you've read Taylor Marshall's book Infiltration, and know the story of Bella Dodds, the communist who was a Catholic, and then she became a communist.
The other way around, communist and then became Catholic.
No, she came back again then.
Oh,
no,
right.
When she was a communist in America, she was a lawyer, and she worked, and she personally supervised the inauguration of 1,100 homosexual men as Catholic priests. So these people were never priests, they were parasites, and they were sent there to do a job. And this again is in the public record. If you Google her, Bella Dodds, you'll find that. She then rediscovered, and Fulton Sheen listened to her and put out the story about this, but he wouldn't allow her to name names. And a lot of these people at that time now would have been fairly high up in the hierarchy of the church. And he wouldn't let her name. And I think that was a very, very wrong decision. At that time, he was probably the first media. He was a big radio personality, and he was doing great evangelizing or whatever. But the Bella Dodds, this is the thing that was done. A lot of this is not organic, and a lot of this is driven, again, like so much of this is, by a global elite. And you see, the thing is, if you don't believe in God, that's grand. But these people do, and their God is the devil. And when you understand that is an inversion of, so that the way that this is, and we hear that it's a spiritual battle, and that makes perfect sense. These people are steeped in the occult, in Luciferianism, in Satanism, in ritualistic magic. And if you look back, a lot of the roads lead back to the same people, the Aleister Crowleys, what do you call your woman, the seance person, Blavatsky, yeah. And a lot of these people then are the instigators of the United Nations. One of the Aleister Crowley's protégés wrote the part on education, inclusive education for the UNESCO.
With the 5-year-olds.
Yeah, all of that. It all comes from this well of occult evil. And these people believe in their God. Their God is what we call Owl Red Legs. That's a Belfast one. Owl Red Legs. And the destruction of the family, and the I think it was Cardinal Sarah who put it so beautifully. He said the refusal to accept your divine nature as a sexual being. And that this is a huge agenda, and it's tied up with almost every aspect of our lives, and we can see it now. And it helps make sense of it if you understand the spiritual aspect of it. Because look at Ireland, what has happened to Ireland in the last 20 years, even the last 10 years. It is unbelievable. This is not organic. None of this has happened. We have, what is it? Is it 33,000 NGOs? Is that correct? Costing the Irish taxpayer billions every year. These are paid activists to dismantle all that we hold dear. And I don't mean to sound that we should be back, dancing at the crossroads, although I think that would be quite nice.
Well, you were always good at dancing because you came up with the choreographs in the hospitals. So no wonder you want to be dancing again.
What are they with Jerusalem and all that? No, I know I'm a Shandos dancer now. I do. I actually used to go out to the Outer Hebrides to learn Scottish Shandos dancing. I can do.
So if this is all orchestrated by the powers that be, and it's so you think it's worse than money and greed and profit? You think there's something more to it? It's beyond that.
Somebody says you can only sleep in one bed and eat one dinner. Do once you have the degree of wealth that you can't do anymore. You have the yachts, you have the Lamborghinis, you have the life, you have more of that. What are you going to do with it? You probably don't even like your children if you have children.
Did the darkness try and get you? Did anybody try and win you over? Now, Anne, don't be talking like that. If you say it like this now, you'll make a few bob over here. Just be quiet and you'll get this. Did you have any of your peers or anybody? It was
very much mockery. She is a dissident. She is a nutcase. So my arrest and imprisonment was not only an unlawful kidnapping, but it was interference with an election. We had the police ombudsman in this morning. The two boys are sitting with their jaws hanging off the table. And because they're not used to people talking about notarized affidavits and their rights under the Geneva Convention, and what they're used to people getting messed about, but not so comprehensively as I was. I think they were quite horrified at what happened. You know, being assaulted in a court of law and being taken out and all of that.
Good, as they should be.
So they should be,
No.
yeah. And to be fair, one of them, first sentence, he's going, well, you know, I'm vaccine injured. I had 3 AstraZenecas and I have atrial fibrillation and everything. I was like, oh, no, you poor man. I know we protocol might help you. Don't forget, none of them have any power. These people are all hamsters on the treadmill, making the bigger wheels turn.
I think everybody in this room knows there's excess deaths now way higher, between 20 and 30%.
28% for the month of July this year, according to the wonderful Patrick
pandemic,
Walsh.
right at the height of the pandemic. So it's 28% this month or this year?
July.
Okay, so you've seen a lot of that, and you just mentioned that you have a protocol. Is there a protocol for vaccine? People who may be injured. Have you got a magic pill?
I wish there are various protocols going about. Who knows what's in these things? Who knows if they're the same? Who knows if the batch numbers are the same? What we do know is that the stuff which was in the alleged clinical trials was different to the stuff then that they put in people's arms. So how can you have a protocol for something? Beginning of this, I thought I'm going crazy, and I heard Dolores talking about mRNA technology and about the decades of research which had already been done, and that these things were known to cause autoimmune diseases, known to cause. And Dave Poland from Ryland Media very early on got, I think, 6 or 7 Irish doctors, of which I was proud to be one, talking about what we knew. These things hadn't even been brought to market at this stage, talking about what inevitably was going to happen. So that when you realise that this was done on purpose, these are bioweapons. And again, we're back to the state being at war with you. These are rolled out under emergency use legislation. As the courts in America with the Brooke Jackson case have shown, they don't need clinical trials. They are not a medicinal product. They are a military product. These are bioweapons. And they don't have the rules that medicines have. They don't need clinical trials. They don't need approval. They don't need any of it. And when I stood up on the 21st of August, 2021, and after a particularly harrowing shift when I saw a young teenager with a clot in her upper arm, a subclavian vein clot, something that I have never seen, I've never heard of in 40 years of medical practice, that for me just flipped. And I knew I was going to have to talk about the vaccine harms. So I made the video at 6 o'clock that evening. And at 11:15, Dr. Professor Sir Michael McBride, I don't know what order those things come in. So at 11:15 that night, on the Saturday night, freaked and emailed his subordinate and says, get her struck off. Essentially, is paraphrasing the email. It's not too far off what he wrote. Is this doctor registered? I wish that this be urgently reviewed. At 11:15 at night, I was suspended the following Monday morning. I went into the media knew before I knew. The media were copied into that email as well, by the way, and the head of media operations at the General Medical Council and all the rest of it. And as I say, I knew it was going to happen, and I knew that the 3-year battle with the General Medical Council was going to happen. And I thank God for every minute of it. You see, there's no point in arguing science, because these people, as we know, don't do science. They don't do data. They don't do stats.
Science
it's
is
their
moving,
science.
Moving at the speed of science.
Moving at the speed of science means as fast as you can write a check, I'll produce the science. That's about the size of it. And so what we did was argue the law and argue against using their own protocols, using their own documents. I have 9 unrebutted affidavits with a little help from my friends with the High Court. We then went to the Court of Appeal. They couldn't even hear the appeal because we had already won in the court. And not only that, but we have unravelled so much dirt in all organisations. The General Medical Council, people would think that's a thing for looking after doctors. Doctor pay for the registration. They employ 97 solicitors and 2 doctors. So does that tell you something about the direction of travel there? Unreal. The High Court judges, the Appeal Court judges are all members of the Privy Council. So they take an oath to keep secrets and only divulge them to His Royal Majesty or Her Royal Majesty, as the case may be. And then they take another oath to say that they treat people coming before them without fear or favour. So I stood up in the High Court and asked them which oath were they under today, and I read out the oath of the Privy Council, and the Lady Chief Justice turned a funny colour. Yeah. So all of this is there, and it's I like to say, I wouldn't change a minute of it. It was such crack. And talking again about the spiritual thing, I stood up in the High Court the first day, and we had rebutted their affidavits. One of them was I left Derry with an hour to get to the court to put in this affidavit for 4 o'clock. I left Derry at, I think, about 10 to 3. I was going, I'm not going to make this. I have no idea how I did it, like screeching brakes. I wouldn't put an elastoplast as a practicing doctor on somebody without being insured, because if you do harm, even in good faith, they deserve compensation. That's why we pay insurance. But it also allows you, if you do get into trouble, that they'll pay your legal expenses. So they appoint a firm of essentially lackeys. And we then tried to move outside of that, and I got a lawyer in Belfast who was supposed to be a human rights lawyer. But the barrister that he appointed then refused to actually take the system on, because the system is their bread and butter. He hears the GMC cases. He doesn't care if people win, lose or draw, as long as he gets 500 quid an hour in the court. That's what happens. And that's paid out of doctor's subs. I then had to take it on myself. But this is the first day in court, right? And there's about 100. The public gallery is rammed packed. And the judge is there going, one word ideas, I'm going to put these all out. That was his sort of opening salvo. Yeah. They were brilliant. But I stood up, and I had people on WhatsApp and on Facebook groups, and they're all going, we're going to be praying for you. We're on your side. We're with you. We can't come tomorrow. I have to work. I have whatever. And I stood up in that court, and my 2 knees were knocking blue blazes out of one another in sheer terror. And I looked up at these boys with all their wigs and their gowns, and I could feel the power. I promise you. I just looked at them and went, I know who you people are. I know what you're doing. Just completely lost fear. So I went down at the mid-morning break and said there was a row of the Precious Life girls, half a dozen of them, and I said, what do you think of that? What do you think? Says, we weren't listening. We were saying the rosary. What? Do you seriously think we'd be listening to that? No more remotely interested. And I don't know if any of you know Dr. Owen Gallagher. He's a retired GP in the North, and he runs the Men's Rosary Crusade in Ireland. So I walked into the court again that same morning. He comes up to me and says, Anne, have the whole place sorted? And I'm going, what is this man talking to me? He says, sorted, he says. Cool, he says, blessed salt over all their chairs, miraculous medals stuck everywhere. I just going, and like a couple of years ago I would have went, this man needs an ambulance, But I just going, isn't that class? You just completely lost fear. It was brilliant. And it's been like that since. Everybody brings a wee bit of the hope that we have. Aidan is the comedian. Everybody, it's like a jigsaw, and everybody brings their wee bit. And we can't really go back.
Well, you're cancelled. You can't go back. The rest of us still have hope.
I know. No. I'm extremely hopeful. I mean, what do you hear? What we've cooked up? What do you hear?
What was it like being cancelled? Because not everybody's had the privilege yet.
The painful part is my eldest son works in Queen's University Belfast. He's a bright lad. He's a PhD in nanotechnology. He makes subcutaneous implants, sponsored by the Wellcome Trust. I love him dearly. That man hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. And that's the only part that has been like really painful. The others, I have 3 other Waynes, and they're just wishing it would go away. And in a way, I'm trying to protect them from, and they kind of get it, and they kind of know, but they just could we not just leave us out of it, or to various extents. My youngest, my daughter Sinead, some of you may remember, was arrested in St. Patrick's Day. She came down. I was to speak at outside RTE, St. Patrick's Day 2021, and she was arrested that day and spent the day in the Garda station, and they put the fear of God in her. Now the guards weren't unpleasant, but what happened afterwards, and the threats and the fines, and the fact that she had a government job, and they were saying that they were going to have a warrant for her arrest out if she didn't pay all of this, and she put in paperwork, and she was going to, and she was she's sort of an anxious wee critter anyway. And eventually I just said, you should pay the bloody fine. What odds? You don't have to be a martyr, And she felt she was letting me down by doing that and all of that. So those are the things that have been painful. Being cancelled doesn't matter because I now see that my profession are a bloody disgrace. I had two regular and another two more intermittently hospital consultants. These are now a cardiologist in the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast, one of the most prestigious teaching hospitals in Europe, ringing me up at regular intervals and telling me, "Oh, did you hear this? And I saw this and what." And eventually, and I was sort of going, "Yeah, it's great, it's really good." And eventually I said, "Would you ever catch yourself on? You're a consultant cardiologist. If you spoke, it would be worth 50 of a Derry retired GP." And I can't. Students now are coming out with tens of thousands of pounds of debt, thanks to Tony Blair and thanks to the way that the funding for universities has been changed.
But that's because the pints are a lot more than 23p.
Pints, I was getting to that.
Oh, sorry.
Pints are now what? Pints have probably gone up more than mortgages have. You know, proportionally. It's a lot harder to get hammered on your grant. But you know what I mean? It's a very different climate. And the other thing is that my parents told me, if I ever got a bit stroppy, they go, "Listen, you here, your degree was paid for by the bricklayers and the plasterers of this town, and never you forget it. That's who paid for you." I think the young ones now come out crippled with debt and with a sense of entitlement that the world owes them something because they have paid so much. And my heart does go out to them. I feel so sorry for them. And they're not allowed to think. And that can't be a pleasant place to be. And again, when I was a young one, UCD was a hotbed of there was every sort of opinion and you could say whatever you wanted. You could be different and people would not discount you or dismiss you. And I think that's something that's very precious that we're losing. So that's kind of about being cancelled.
Yeah.
It's all right. You get used to it. And as I say, because of being cancelled, even though I've been cancelled by people that I love dearly, I've made so many new friends. Like, I wouldn't be here, Aidan, if I wasn't cancelled. Would I?
The best and the worst bit of COVID?
Best bit was your gig in my back garden. That was wild crack.
Do you remember any of it?
Very little.
Well, if whiskey could cure COVID, we're all safe anyway. We were drinking whiskey in Dolores' Cahill one night and there was the same bottle. There was no glasses. And if COVID was real, I tell you, we'd all be dead.
I'll never forget, I've been invited to this castle and she says, bring lots of warm clothes.
Oh, God, it was freezing.
There was no windows, there was no doors, there was no heat, there was no running water, there were no toilets. I thought it was a castle. I was sort of picking out a little cocktail number.
The media have had fun portraying you in a certain way, and you don't really get to speak back to them fairly. So what would you like the world to know? Like, what would you like them to know about you or your message?
You're going to say, what would you like to say to the media?
Yeah, what would you like? Well, what would you like to say to the BBC specifically? I know, to the world.
And this is what we're saying about the election thing. So I went up to the count, and somebody on the way in, the BBC reporter, come up and he goes, Dr. McCloskey, do you mind if I just take a little photograph? And I said, do you mind if I take off my jumper first? So I took off my jumper and I was wearing a T-shirt that said, defund the BBC. The fake news factory. And it was right on the top of their website. They published it. And then the UK column news got a hold of it, and there's me grinning from ear to ear with defund the BBC on the BBC's website. That was worth more than a seat in Westminster. It was great. So I got almost exactly the same number of votes as Andrew Bridgen. I thought that was strange. Just a couple of votes less than keeping your deposit. It was a humiliation exercise. Now, I was in the count, and the count was all going on, and I went outside around the back, round to where the lorries were coming in, and a man came over to me and he says, Anne, I want you to know this. He says, I'm a neighbour of yours. I live at the bottom of Chapel Road. I live at the top of Chapel Road. And he says, I want you to know, he says, there's three boxes have gone missing. I hear they're in the police station in Derry. He says, we don't know where they are. Somebody apparently has gone back over the mountain across Grand Chain to look for these 3 boxes. And he says, it's chaos. He says, there's no chain of custody. What they do is they outsource the collection of ballot papers to a private security firm. There's no supervision, there's no sign-off, there's no people signing for counting boxes and ticking them off and locking the thing. And, it's just a free-for-all. There were people coming in with big bags of paper, and I said, big plastic bags? I said, what's in the plastic bags? Oh, spare stationery. They went and emptied it onto the table. A complete, there is, and it's come back to, is it worth I think, and indeed George Soros, I think, has told us that democratic elections are finished. I think if you go into it knowing that, it's still a worthwhile, because I got knocking every door in the Bogside, the Moor, the Craigan. What we were doing in the canvas was looking for trampolines in the garden and looking for roller skates and looking for wee shoes at the door and giving them a leaflet saying, protect your children. These are the statistics around COVID from Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency, and that these are not indemnified. And there were links to papers written by, eminent Stephanie Seneff, all the risks, and Jonathan Weissman stuff. All of those links were on them, and we were able to give 40,000 of those out around. They went across the north, but in every house in Derry, people were laughing. They were going, "Oh, hello, and what? Tell me what you're standing for." And I go, "Don't mind that. You've Wayne's, haven't you? Here, read that." It's just a brilliant way of connecting with people. We had whole streets in the Craigan and in the Bog and in the Moor. They were bringing out babies for me to kiss. People are so awake in the working class areas, and I think it's true of the country in general. Once you go to the leafy suburbs, forget it. They all have PhDs in victimology and wankology and all the rest of it. They don't want to know. They're not able to listen. But if you go to places where people go out and earn a feckin' living, it's a completely different vibe. So that was actually the best part of COVID, was just going and talking to people and realising that there's an awful lot more people out there.
Sounds like you made a few enemies along the way, but an awful lot of friends and had a lot of fun.
That's the one.
Right,
yeah.
So if there's another pandemic, there you go. There's a role model for you.
And I'd have got round to the enemies eventually anyway, because they are bastards, like.